Hi fermentation friends, today we're taking on a new type of kimchi for me. This is a white kimchi, which is a fresh kimchi without any chili flakes. As such, it won't last as long once it's ready to eat. It can be eaten starting at the 3-day mark and keeps for up to 1 month in the fridge. It does take quite a number of ingredients, which you can feel free to sub in and out according to your taste. We'll start with the napa cabbage. This is a pretty big one, so I'll use some of the leaves for a more traditional spicy red kimchi while I'm at it. 1 Korean radish or mu. This is not the same as white daikon. 3 or 4 carrots, which I used instead of red and yellow bell peppers. 3 green onions or scallions. 1 teaspoon of minced ginger. 3 cloves of garlic. 1 Asian pear or apple pear. If you haven't had these before, you're in for a real treat. They're super sweet and super juicy. 1 apple. I used envy, but you can use any sweet apple, really. 5 cooked chestnuts. You can find bags of cooked chestnuts at the Asian grocery store. I don't bother with boiling or roasting my own. These are in place of pine nuts, which are often used in this style of kimchi. We'll need a handful of dehydrated jujubes or dates. There are a few different types. This recipe calls for the red kind, so we'll rehydrate these before cutting them into small strips for the recipe. And finally, for the brine, the typical kosher salt and fish sauce. I used the 3 Crabs brand. And of course, lastly, the saeujeot or fermented shrimps, salted shrimps. You can find these at H Mart or any Korean grocery store. This, along with the lacto-fermentation, is what gives kimchi its distinct funky flavor. And finally, 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar. I did forget to bring out and mention one more ingredient. You do need 1 tablespoon of glutinous rice flour or cornstarch for part of the brine. My bad. This is a little more intense than some of our other recipes thus far, but I think we can do it. We're going to use a blender or food processor today to make the brine, so have that at the ready. We're going to start with the napa. Peel off the outer layers that may be a little roughed up. We'll discard those ones. Because napa cabbage tends to be rather large, I've started using 1 cabbage to make multiple batches of kimchi. So a lot of these outer leaves I'll be using to make traditional spicy napa cabbage kimchi later. Now I've got it down to the size I want, I'm going to trim the bottom. It's always better to cut from the firmer side, so use the heel of your hand again to drive the knife through. I'm going to cut this into quarters. For my other recipe, I'm going to go ahead and trim the bottoms of the leaves. Now we're going to make the brine to soak the wedges. Get the largest bowl or container you can possibly find and dissolve at least 2 tablespoons of kosher salt with tepid water. I just use tepid water because it helps the kosher salt dissolve a little bit faster. I sprinkled salt on the cabbages to encourage them to release more water. If possible, it's better to do this initial soak overnight with a weight on top of it and the cabbage completely submerged. I only ended up soaking mine while I prepped the other ingredients, and I deeply regretted it. So let's make the filling now while we wait. Peel the Korean radish. peel the carrots. Peel and core the apple. I always peel mine by hand. That's just the way I was taught. Peel and core the apple pear in the same way. The skin is very thin, and the flesh will be slick since it will be so juicy. Peel and trim the garlic, wash and trim the green onions. Cut into 2 to 3 inch long batons. We'll further slice these into thin slivers by quartering them lengthwise. Now it's time for the ginger. Slice the ginger into thin rounds, stack them nicely, and julienne. Trim the carrots and the Korean radish. The radish is a lot harder to chop through, so we just have to employ a little bit of force. We'll chop up the cooked chestnuts. Now it's time to grate everything. Set up your grater. I started with the middle setting, but I think I like the bigger teeth better, so I adjusted it. We'll grate the Korean radish and carrots. Now it's time to make the white kimchi brine using our mixer. Add the whole garlic, cloves, and sliced ginger. Add the apple pear you totally didn't eat part of off screen, and the apple. Make sure the lid is on tight, and proceed to blitz and scrape until the mixture is completely blended. Use a rubber spatula to get all the fruity goodness out. Measure out 1/4 cup of the fermented shrimp. Mince this until it's basically a paste. We're going to create the filling now. Add 1 tablespoon of fish sauce, and using gloves, make sure to coat the daikon and carrot. Add the green onions, chestnuts, and rehydrated jujubes. Mix until everything is evenly distributed. Looks pretty good. Now to the fun part, stuffing the kimchi. As you can see, the napa cabbage did not really get very soft, so I'll definitely be using a bigger bucket and leaving it overnight next time. This will still work, it'll just be more difficult. Lift up each napa leaf layer by layer and stuff with a little wad of the filling. Spread it all the way from the base of the leaf to the tip of the leaf. This is definitely a messy process, but I think it'll be worth it. I imagine the flavor will be super refreshing. Time to cram it in the giant jar. How did I come by such a huge jar, you might ask? It's actually a restaurant-grade maraschino cherry jar I expect from when my family owned a restaurant with a full-service bar. Gotta love these old glass jars. Thanks, Ma. Take your time layering the kimchi in. When it's softened correctly, this process should be a lot easier than I have it, and you'll be able to roll the actual leaves over each other more like a parcel shape. Right now, the name of the game is to make sure they fit with enough headroom on the jar to ensure they're completely covered with the brine. So I'm really just kind of cramming them in there. I poured the runoff juices into the pan and added glutinous rice mixture, which I made off screen because I was too exhausted to film that part. I also added our blended fruit mixture. Now we're going to pour the mixture into the jar, diluting it with 4 cups of water, or however much water it takes to cover it, really. You can see the brine is sitting towards the top. We'll have to use a spatula to coax the liquid to seep into all the nooks and crannies. Proper fermentation means everything must be covered. We need to reduce as many air bubbles as possible too. Now the jar is filled and I've placed the plastic lid inside to keep the vegetables down, I'm using cling wrap as an added precaution. I'll put the lid on and try to incorporate the runoff liquid at the bottom, with the fruit brine towards the top as best as possible. This jar will set out at room temperature for only 1 day before we transfer it to the fridge for the next 3 to 7. It will be ready to consume in 3 days, peak day of flavor being 7-day mark, after which it will begin to sour up until 1 month. See you then!